everybody, and welcome to Season 14, Episode 21 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday, the 27th of July. We're back again. We're going to be bringing you some community news and events and some news headlines. If you like what you hear and you'd like to tell us about it, you can email show@ubuntupodcast.org, or if you'd like to come and chat with us in between shows, you can do that at ubuntupodcast.org/telegram. But enough about that. Let's see who's joining me this week. It's Alan.
Hello.
And Martin.
Hello there.
How are you doing this week, Alan?
Good. Not as hot.
It's not as hot, is it?
No.
I'm having the same experience.
Yes.
Martin, are you not as hot?
I agree. Not as hot.
Fans off, graphics cards up to max.
Yes. Computers on all the time again.
And what have you been doing since last we spoke?
I have been going back to the office.
Is that just across the hallway from the bedroom?
Well, that is the office that I have been exclusively occupying for the last year and a half. But in the before times, I used to work 2 or 3 days a week in a co-working space not far from where I live. And that is open again. And because of how hot it has been in recent times and how good their air conditioning is, I decided I would make inquiries and find out if I could reinstate my membership. So I've been going back to Desk Lodge the last couple of working days. And it's been very nice to see other people and have conversations over, whilst you're brewing your mugs of tea and stuff. It's, it's nice to get away from the confines of this prison I've been in.
Lovely. I've not been back to the office in a very long time, so I'll be interested to see how things go once that becomes a thing again. Alan, what have you been up to?
I've been putting more things on eBay.
Oh,
yes.
More ThinkPads?
No ThinkPads yet, but old iPads and iPhones and stuff like that, and all kinds of other stuff. But interestingly, I got rid of our lounge DVD player and amplifier.
Wow. Do people buy those things?
Well, you might be surprised to hear.
Yes. Antique shops buy those things.
No, individual bought one. The amplifier went for £60-something. And while it was the auction was ongoing, I had an email or message from someone, a prospective buyer, saying, would I be able to ship it to a foreign country? And I'm like, yeah, whatever, no problem. So he bid and won, and it comes to the point where I have to ship it and send them an invoice for how much it's going to cost to ship. And they want it shipped to Argentina. So I'm sending a piece of fine British electronics over the seas to Argentina, and the cost of shipping is ludicrous. And I had to get some help from our Argentine friend Sergio to understand how...
Our correspondent in Argentina.
Yes, to understand how postal addresses work in Buenos Aires, which I didn't understand. But it was all good fun. Yeah.
Very good.
And with that, let's get on with the show. And now it's time for some community news and events. Martin, what's happening in the community this week?
Well, it is with a heavy heart that I can inform you that Ubuntu 2010, codename Groovy Gorilla, has now reached its end of life. So it reached end of life on July the 22nd. So that's about a week ago as we record this. So if you're running 2010, it's time to upgrade because you will not be getting those all-important security fixes.
I've just realised why you're so heavy-hearted about this, because you named this one, didn't you?
This was my bucket list moment. This was the distro that I got to give the code name for, quite by accident, but nevertheless, it was my code name. So yeah, I'm sorry to see this one go. It would have been good to have an LTS for one of those rather than a short-lived interim.
Alan, what's next?
Well, the gorilla is dead. Long live Bullseye.
Indeed.
Debian Bullseye release is planned for 14th of October, which is very soon now. There's an announcement on the Debian Devel announce mailing list from Paul Gevers. I think that's right. And they plan to release the next stable release, Bullseye, on 14th of August. There's some suggestions in there if you want to have a release party to celebrate that, and also some administrative stuff about dates when you must, comply with the rules to get your packages in if you want them to be in bullseye before final release. So yes, exciting times. Another Debian release.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about release parties happening again.
Yeah, it was really weird seeing that. Yeah.
Well, yes, there is that as well. Yeah, an actual release party.
Yeah. Next up, Muse Group, who we discussed in previous episodes, have taken over stewardship of Audacity, have revised Audacity's privacy policy after the initial draft caused much consternation in the community.
Gosh, it's back and forth constantly, isn't it? What?
Yeah.
What particularly did they have to address?
One of the big glaring issues was that they had what seemed to me to be quite clearly some boilerplate which their lawyers would automatically slap on every privacy policy that said you can't accept this privacy policy if you're under 13 and you shouldn't use the software if you're under 13, which made people say, wait a minute, this is open source software. You can't stop people using it because of their age. So they've now had a chat with their lawyers and realised that was... they said it had been included out of an abundance of caution.
Not an abundance of forethought, though. It might have been nice.
I'd removed that. They've also clarified that they don't collect any additional information for law enforcement or any other purpose, which some people took the previous wording to mean that if law enforcement required them to, they'd start collecting lots of other information about you via Audacity, which seems like a massively inefficient way of doing it anyway.
I mean, they can turn the microphone on if that's what they need.
I suppose so, while you're recording anyway. Yeah. They've explained the purpose of the two networking features, which were error reporting and update checking. And they've also said that they expect that, because those are behind compile flags, they expect that distro packages on Linux will turn them off anyway. It's only the packages that they ship, presumably on Windows and Mac OS, which they're assuming will have it on.
Yeah, I did see some analysis from one of the distro packages for Audacity who actually dug into this and said, well, actually, it looks like flags I can just twiddle at build time, and this is what they do. And if you're familiar with sort of software development, there's a platform called Sentry, which captures, back traces and crash reports and things of that nature. So you can spot where the bugs and the issues are in your software and then get them fixed. It's a bit like what the Ubuntu report, service does for all of Ubuntu and the packages that are in the Ubuntu archive.
Right, so this is something which is not a unique thing that Audacity built. It's something that they've hooked into, which other platforms use.
Snapcraft uses Sentry.
Uh-huh.
It does.
There's an opt-in when you first run Snapcraft where it asks you, it'd be really nice if you submitted Sentry error reports, and there's an environment variable where you can disable it. So much like, the common pattern now is to bake Sentry support into your application, but provide some way for you to turn it off, because a lot of enterprises, not just individuals who are privacy conscious, but enterprises don't want data leaking out of their organization. So they'll mandate some way to turn that off. And having used Sentry for doing Snapcraft debugging, it's very useful. I get an email that says, that someone has reported a problem or an instance of Snapcraft has crashed somewhere. And that
would usually be me.
Yeah, well, often myself. I would run it and then immediately get an email to tell me Snapcraft crashed. I'm like, yeah, I know that. it was me what did it. But it's got a web UI where you can, go through the back traces and all that kind of stuff. It's quite a useful utility.
And the last thing they said is they've now taken steps to ensure that they never store a full IP address, which it sounded like was probably the main sort of culprit for like GDPR, personally identifying information. They're now going to either truncate or hash it before they store it. So hopefully that will keep the wolf from the door for a while longer.
This whole Audacity situation could be written up as a case study in how to avoid miscommunication, particularly in sort of, open source leadership, project leadership changes and things of that nature.
It's funny, whenever I see the line, "We do not store a full IP address," I'm reminded of all the people who went for us when we said we don't store your full IP address at Canonical. And you get all the, well, you must store it for at least some time in order to reply to the TCP request. And the TCP reply has got to know where to go back to. So you must be storing the IP address. It's like, oh, God, like you complete the transaction and sure, in some instances, there's an IP address written in a log file somewhere, but there's some process that either scrubs them or deletes them, or they're stored in memory and then never written to disk, or whatever it might be. There are well-established protocols for not storing your personally identifiable information in a data center.
I mean, we could just flash the ARP caches on the switches every nanosecond, but then, of course, the internet wouldn't work.
That's one way to do it, yes.
Oh, what's last in the community use, Martin?
Last I spotted on the Ubuntu discourse that Khurshid Alam is requesting testing of the Unity session in Ubuntu 21.10. So this is what will be the next release of Ubuntu coming out in October.
Sorry, did you say Unity?
I did say Unity.
Flashback.
Yes. I thought you'd like this one. So there's been some sort of, as GNOME gently marches forward and, you know, APIs and things change, Unity has to sort of be patched and changed in order to work with the newer versions of underlying GNOME components. So in this case, they've done some work on the Unity settings daemon and the Unity control center. And this seems to be mostly around things like setting wallpapers and things of that nature and adding support for newer versions of Nautilus. And so, yeah, there is. And I also spotted in there that the Ubuntu desktop team are actually helping, providing some advice in order to ensure that Unity will continue to function, even though they're having to, you know, work around some of the sort of the patches and the new features that they want to take advantage of. But anyway, for those people that are still running Unity, and I know there's plenty of you, if you want to help the project out, then spark up a VM. I think a VM will be good enough for this task because it's just software. It's not about hardware. Run up the new version in the VM. The link is in the show notes, and you'll even find that the Ubuntu Unity maintainer has updated the PPA for Hirsute Hippo with these changes, so you can actually test it out on a current version as well.
Excellent.
You know what I'd really like to see is a refresh of the UI for Unity, and I know that's a big ask, and it's you know, it requires some design input and, you know, the developers to refigure out where in the code base stuff lives, but just something of a visual refresh of the dash so it doesn't look like that brown, transparent, glassy thing over the top of your desktop. So it looks a bit more flat and looks a bit more like, you know, the KDE menu or Mate menus, and you know the current way in which people present icons in a box when you press the super key, that kind of thing. It'd be lovely if they could update that visual design. That'd be really nice.
Would that not upset all those people that have a special place in their heart for Unity, though?
No, I think quite the opposite, because people like Unity because it gets out of their way. It's fast. And you just stab a button and then start typing, which, you know, everyone else now does. But we blazed a trail with that when everyone thought it was terrible. And I think if you weren't poked in the face with this design from 10 years ago, that might make it even better, I think.
Well, there we go. Feedback from the source himself.
And that's all the community news this week. And now for some items from the wider tech world. Martin, what's been happening on the YouTubes?
Well, some YouTube influencers have blown the whistle on an anti-vax plot. So this is a twisty-turny story, but it turns out there is a mysterious marketing agency that secretly offered to pay social media influencers to spread disinformation about COVID-19 vaccines.
Wow.
This is an interesting story. It's interesting that you know, someone with an agenda is paying people to say something for them. Now, that's not news in and of itself, because people do that all the time.
Right.
And you sponsor an event to get, or a person to get them to talk about your product or your service, or, to vouch for your opinion or whatever it might be. Obviously, there's the negative side of this, which is, that it was disinformation and trying to paint a particular vaccine in a bad light. But I don't know. I don't know why we should feel shocked by this, because I feel like this is happening all the time, and there's a whole story about this, and there's all these influencers, figured out what was going on, and there's this shadowy organization and shadowy ad campaign, and it's all been shut down now, and there's this whole story behind it. Part of me thinks surely this is happening all the time.
Yeah, there's definitely echoes of Cambridge Analytica here, right? Where, an organization with some data has been able to, basically change the outcome of, an election. And this is not on that scale. But what strikes me as most interesting about this story is this is an anti-science agenda. And they went after YouTubers who are very much in the science community. And it feels like a very, not well planned or executed, plot here. So two of the YouTubers, there's Mirko Druschmann, who's a German YouTuber and journalist, and a science YouTuber, Leo Grasset, who's in France. And they were both offered €2,000 to spread misinformation that was apparently being pitched as leaked information about the death rates, elevated death rates for some of the recipients of one of the vaccines. Now, it turns out that what they were being asked to do was not divulge that they were being sponsored, and also not divulge where this information came from, which is against the terms of service of the social media platforms, but also illegal in France and Germany, where these two individuals reside. So this set off some pretty big alarms for them. And what they decided to do was play along, collect as much information as possible, and then out the story on Twitter.
Were the two YouTubers in touch with each other while this was going on? Had they both worked this out, or were they independently doing their own thing and then realised?
It isn't clear to me from reading sort of the sequence of events whether they were in cahoots or whether they just happened to be doing the same thing. Since they've outed the story, a number of other YouTubers across Europe have come forward and said, I was also contacted, but turned it down. So, it wasn't just a couple of people that were approached.
There was also a couple who didn't turn it down.
Indeed.
Who did make the video. One of them, I couldn't quite figure out where it was from. It looked like either Malaysia or somewhere in the Far East. And in the BBC story, they said they tried to get in contact with them, but they got no response. And I suspect they've deleted all the references to this thing, and they probably feel terrible about doing it, but not so terrible that they're going to talk to a high profile news organization like the BBC and make themselves look stupid.
So yes, there was a YouTuber from India and another from Brazil who had clearly, gone along with the plot because their videos are very much in line with the script that these others had received. Now it turns out they have removed these particular videos, but it also has come to light since that those two YouTubers have videos on their channel that are promoting similar scams from the same organization from some time ago. So this marketing agency is in the throes of being shut down. It was registered in the UK and Russia.
No way.
Yeah, well, apparently, I don't like saying, and Russia, because there's this stereotype now that, Russia bad, China bad. Whenever you attach those two country names to a news story, it's usually in negative connotations. But the speculation is that this Russian connection may be linked to the Russian state in promoting their own vaccine for COVID.
It makes you wonder if the Linux podcast community is rife with misinformation campaigns from nefarious organisations.
Well, nefarious individuals, maybe.
Yeah, send us your £2,000, please.
Alan, what have you seen this week?
It's nearly time for Playdate.
Is it?
Yes.
What's that then?
Playdate is a handheld game console. It's designed by Panic, who are a game developer, and Teenage Engineering did the hardware design. And Teenage Engineering are renowned for making audio devices like synthesizers. And they have some that are just beautiful. The design is just gorgeous. They're very compact. And they just look, I mean, whenever you watch someone using one, it just looks like a joy to use and joy to look at without even using it. It's like, so they've come together to make this thing called the Playdate. Now, they describe it as a new, tiny handheld game system with a bunch of brand new games. We made Playdate just for fun. And I think the reason for that just for fun thing in there is because it's a bit quirky as game consoles go. The key things in the list of quirks, it's bright yellow, like real bright yellow, but it's got a monochrome screen. So it's just black and white, very low resolution. It's not backlit. And it's widescreen.
Like a Game Boy.
A bit like a Game Boy, but better, but monochrome. I mean, Game Boy at least had 4 shades, but it was really
so this is just black and white?
Yeah, monochrome. So you could get stippled effects and stuff like that. It's not super high resolution, but that's okay. You control it with a D-pad and an A and a B button. And to further up the quirks, there's a hand crank on the side of it that like pops out and you can wind forward and backwards as an analog control.
That's a control. It's not a power source.
No, it's a part of the game control system.
Okay.
When I first read it's got a hand crank, I thought, like one of those radios, you got to wind it up before you use it.
That's what I wondered. Yeah. Okay. I quite like this. I mean, this puts me in mind of those Casio single game devices that I used to see in the duty free, when we were going on holiday, and I would be certain that I wanted this game where you just had to move a tank backwards and forwards with 2 buttons and that would keep me amused for 2 weeks.
So in terms of games, it's got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and the games come as part of a season of games. So the device itself will be available from July the 29th. So probably from now, as you listen to this, it's $179 on pre-order. That's when pre-orders open on the 29th. And the games come in a season of 12 weeks. And each of those 12 weeks, you get 2 new games. So they're drip fed over, there's 24 games in a season, but they're drip fed 2 at a time each week over 12 weeks.
And do they stay on the device when you enter a new season, or do you start a new season with a clean slate?
I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how.
Okay.
I believe it has connectivity to PC, but it's also got Wi-Fi connectivity. I don't know if you'll be able to just remove things and put new things on. I imagine you will, because there's also an SDK, so you can create your own games. Now, the SDK hasn't been released yet. They're still working on that. It allows for developers to create games in either Lua or C, and they've got their own font editor and a game editor for doing the tile map, that kind of stuff. But it looks super interesting. It reminds me a little bit of the virtual console called Pico 8 by Lexaloffel, I think it is.
Right.
It's a virtual console. It's got a programming language built into it, and you can make games for this hypothetical console. It's a software console, basically. And it reminds me a little bit of that, because that's similarly low spec, but people manage to do some quite crazy things with Pico 8. And I imagine people are going to do some crazy things with this Playdate, especially with that weird analog crank controller on the side.
Well, as we've recently discovered, having a constraint on your project can be a creative influence.
And finally, anyone for a pint of ink?
Oh, yummy.
What?
So the UK consumer magazine Which have been doing a survey of printer ink, and surprise, surprise, it's really expensive.
No way.
So this was quite interesting, though, because they went through the prices of official inks for various brands of printer. One thing that particularly tickled me was that they chose to quantify the amount of printer ink. Whenever there's an area of land that's described on the news, it's always
the size of Wales.
a number of times the size of Wales, or the number of times the height of a set of double-decker buses. Well, they decided to quantify ink in terms of how much it would be for a pint. So a pint of Epson ink would set you back £1,369.
That's not a good look, is it?
No. But yeah, rather than just, slagging off the prices of official inks, they also actually tested official inks versus third-party inks. And what I found quite interesting was that they found that generic inks were not only cheaper, but in some cases performed better and printed better quality than the official inks. Because I remember back in the day when, Cartridge World first opened in the UK, you'd get your cartridges refilled and you take them home and you print a few pages and then your nozzles would get clogged and you'd end up having to clean out half of the ink and start again.
Nobody wants a clogged nozzle, no.
Indeed not. And things seem to have moved on a bit and improved since then.
I know back in the day, like 5-10 years ago, there was all the rage to use third-party inks and third-party refill systems. And I remember seeing entire contraptions that have multiple wells of ink and pipes that go into the print heads so that you could just fill it up from a bottle rather than doing the old injection using a hypodermic needle or whatever you call it. Actually using these filler buckets that kind of sit on top of the printer.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of Epson's responses to this was that you can buy a printer from Epson that has just a reservoir of each colour of ink that you can refill from a bottle rather than having to buy cartridges, which is meant to be quite a lot cheaper.
But they control the price of both of those.
Yeah, but do you two still have a printer at home? Do you print stuff regularly?
I have two printers. I have a Oki B410 next to me here, which is a black and white laser printer.
I thought you were going to say it's a dot matrix printer there.
I have been looking for a dot matrix printer, but not yet. This one I got for £10 from a charity. Oh, no, I got it actually brand new. It's not a charity one. This one I got £20 from a printing website that had a special offer. Mm-hmm. And it's a laser, and I've replaced the cartridge 2 or 3 times since, but I don't print much. But the one downstairs that the rest of the family use is a HP laser with color laser. And I've replaced those periodically. There's no way on earth you would get me going back to ink. It's just insanity. The price is just ludicrous. Yeah. No.
So we have a color laserjet printer as well. And I find those much more economical. They last much longer, and they're about the same to replace a toner cartridge as it is to replace a set of inks.
Well, there you go. And that's all in the news this week. And that's all for episode 21. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next time.